The small plane touched down with a bump on the narrow landing strip of Norman's Cay. I stepped out into humid Bahamian air that should have felt nice after hours of stale airplane oxygen. Instead, a stillness covered the tiny airport that felt weird. No ground crew rushed to unload luggage. No tourists clustered around rental counters. Just me and my carry-on standing on sun-faded tarmac. A single taxi waited in the otherwise empty parking area. I walked up carefully, looking around for other ride options, but found none. The driver didn't turn when I opened the back door. They didn't ask for a destination when I slid into the worn leather seat. They just put the car in drive and pulled away, like they somehow already knew where to take me. "Beautiful day," I said, attempting conversation as we drove along an overgrown road where vegetation pushed through cracks in the pavement. The driver didn't answer. They just stared at the road, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. I tried again with questions about the island and good places to visit, but got nothing back. After a few minutes, I gave up and just watched the view from my window. The tropical road that should have been beautiful was in bad shape. Palm trees were leaning sideways with brown, falling leaves. The signs for beaches and attractions were so beat up by weather I could barely read them. We passed a few buildings that looked empty, with boards on the windows and paint peeling off. When we finally turned onto a stone driveway marked Palmetto Bay Resort, I felt relieved but also worried. The online photos I'd studied for weeks before booking showed a bright white building with tropical gardens and friendly staff. What I saw matched the basic shape but looked run down. Salt stains covered the windows. The resort sign hung slightly crooked with colors that used to be bright now looking dull and washed out. The taxi stopped at the entrance. I paid in cash, which the driver took without looking at me. They drove off as soon as I closed the door, leaving me alone in front of glass double doors covered in fingerprints. Inside, ceiling fans spun slowly above a lobby that was clean but outdated. No other guests were around. No tropical music played. The front desk was straight ahead, where a woman with blonde hair watched me walk up with a big smile that never changed. "Welcome to Palmetto Bay Resort, Mr. Wright," she said as I reached the counter. "We've been expecting you." I set down my bag, feeling a chill run through my shoulders. I hadn't given my name yet. "Thanks, but how did you—" "Your room key," she interrupted, sliding a plastic card across the desk. Her name tag read Sarah. "Room 217, second floor, east wing, lovely ocean view. Checkout is at 11 a.m. on Friday." Her smile remained fixed as she spoke, not once blinking during our entire exchange. I took the key, telling myself that my reservation details must have included my name and photo. "Is there a welcome packet or resort map?" I asked. "Everything you need is in your room," Sarah replied with practiced precision. "Dinner service ends at 9 p.m. I nodded and went toward the elevators, looking back once to find Sarah still watching me, that same fixed smile on her face. Room 217 was basic but clean. Queen bed, small bathroom, desk by the window. As promised, it had an ocean view with blue water as far as I could see. The view didn't feel as relaxing as it should have. I blamed it on travel fatigue and decided a shower might help. After cleaning up, I walked around the resort grounds. The layout matched the website's description. Main building with restaurant and bar, pool area, beachfront access. But everything looked faded and worn out. There weren't many guests around. Those I did see behaved oddly. A woman in a white sundress stood at the shoreline, staring out at the water. She didn't move, not even when small waves washed over her feet, soaking the hem of her dress. I watched her for 20 minutes from a beach chair, and she stayed completely still the entire time. Not once did she check her phone, swat at insects, or change position. Just perfect stillness that was really weird to see. In the dining area, an older man sat alone at a table for 4, mumbling intensely into empty air. His hands moved as if in deep conversation, sometimes pausing as though listening to responses I couldn't hear. When a server came over, he went quiet until they left, then started up his animated one-sided discussion again. No one on staff seemed to find this strange. Most disturbing was the man walking around the swimming pool. He moved in perfect circles, keeping the exact same distance from the water's edge with each lap. His pace never slowed or sped up. His posture never changed. Round and round he went, never stopping or changing. I sat at the poolside bar, ordering a beer that tasted oddly flat. "Many guests here this week?" I asked the bartender who served me. "Full capacity," he answered, though I'd seen perhaps 5 people total. The snorkeling tour was quite popular this morning. I hadn't heard any announcements about tours nor seen anyone with snorkeling gear. "What time do those tours usually leave?" I asked. 8 a.m. sharp from the main dock," he said, already moving away. "Tomorrow's deep-sea fishing expedition leaves at 7:30. When I looked around the resort later, I found no main dock, just a small, rotting wooden platform that couldn't safely hold more than 2 people. At exactly 10 p.m., as I was reading in my room, the phone on the nightstand rang. I picked it up, expecting the front desk. "Hello?" Nothing but static filled the line. Not the normal kind from a bad connection, but a steady noise that sounded almost like breathing. I hung up quickly, feeling scared. I had a hard time sleeping. My dreams were full of walking figures who never blinked and kids laughing in empty rooms. The next morning, I stood on my balcony with coffee that tasted like hot water with brown food coloring. Looking up, I noticed the clouds in the blue sky. They were exactly the same as yesterday, same shapes, same spots. On the railing of the balcony next door, 3 birds sat in a row. They didn't clean themselves, fight, or fly away when I moved closer. They just sat there, completely still. At breakfast, a staff member approached my table with a fresh napkin. "More coffee, Mr. Wright?" he asked pleasantly. I looked up sharply. "How do you know my name?" He looked confused for a second. "You're a guest here, sir." "Yes, but I never introduced myself to you." The man's face went blank for several seconds, like he was frozen. Then his pleasant expression came back. "Enjoy your breakfast, sir," he said, walking away without answering my question. My worry growing, I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of the weird stuff around me. The birds that weren't moving, the woman still standing in the exact same spot at the shoreline, the man doing his perfect circles around the pool. Each time I checked the photos after taking them, they were messed up. Black squares with random pixels, or pictures so warped they looked like crazy art instead of what I'd actually photographed. I tried a video. The recording seemed fine until I played it back, when all I got was a green screen and twisted audio that made me feel sick. I became more and more sure something was seriously wrong with Palmetto Bay Resort. This wasn't just an old resort with weird guests. The place felt off, like everything was fake and nobody knew what they were supposed to be doing. I put my phone in my pocket and made up my mind. The main building wasn't giving me any answers. Whatever was going on here, I needed to check out areas that weren't meant for guests. My vacation had barely started, but relaxing was the last thing on my mind now. I needed to figure out what was happening at Palmetto Bay Resort before it happened to me too. I was starving, my stomach cramping with hunger. 4 days at Palmetto Bay Resort, and I hadn't eaten resort food since that first night's flat beer and bland dinner. My backpack now held only protein bars and bottled water I'd brought from home, which I was saving as my only safe food. I couldn't sleep well. 20 minutes here, 40 minutes there. Waking up whenever I heard the smallest noise from the hallway or walls. My room had turned into my investigation space. I'd pushed the desk against the wall and taped sheets of hotel paper across it, making a timeline of weird things I'd seen. The clouds that hadn't changed in 4 days. The woman in the white dress who stood at the shoreline without moving, her feet in the same position even when the ocean disappeared for 3 hours yesterday afternoon. Completely gone, leaving wet sand and confused crabs before the water came rushing back like someone turned on a massive tap. The notepad by my phone had marks counting how many times staff members called me by name without introductions. 17 so far. This morning I watched a bird outside my window stay completely still for 2 hours, not even breathing. When I threw a balled up paper at it, the bird didn't move. The paper went right through it like it wasn't real. Most concerning were the cleaning staff I followed yesterday. They went into 6 rooms on the 3rd floor, changed linens, and wiped surfaces without talking. They never said a word to each other, and according to the resort map I took from behind the front desk, the east wing wasn't even open this season. Those rooms should have been empty. My hair was messy from running my hands through it all the time. Dark circles showed under my eyes whenever I passed a mirror. I wondered if I was going crazy. The logical explanation would be some kind of breakdown or paranoia. But being paranoid doesn't explain the weird things I'd seen. I left my room around noon, heading toward the staff-only door I'd seen near the ice machine. A maintenance worker had left it propped open earlier while fixing something, and no one noticed when I put a matchbook from the resort bar into the latch to keep it from closing all the way. The service hallway was dim, smelling like cleaning products and mildew. I walked quickly, listening for footsteps, but heard nothing. Just the noise of faraway machines. I walked past storage closets and electrical panels until I reached concrete stairs going down. The basement had what looked like laundry equipment. Big washing machines lined one wall. Folded sheets filled metal shelves. Everything was clean but old, like stuff from the early 2000s. No staff were around, which seemed weird for the middle of the day at a busy resort. In the middle of the concrete floor was something that didn't fit, a square metal hatch with a handle, like a smaller version of a submarine door about 3 feet across. It was painted the same gray as the floor, trying to blend in, but years of people walking had worn away the paint around the edges. I looked around one more time, making sure I was alone, then knelt and pulled the handle. It didn't move. Looking at it closer, I saw a small electronic lock needing a key card. Whatever was below this door, the resort wanted it locked up. I went back to the main building, thinking hard. At the front desk, Jennifer stood straight, her empty eyes not focused on anything. "Excuse me," I said, approaching carefully. I was wondering about the basement facilities. Jennifer's eyes didn't meet mine. "How can I help you today, Mr. Wright?" "The door in the floor of the laundry room, where does it lead?" Her expression didn't change. Not a hint of confusion or recognition crossed her face. It was as if I'd said nothing at all. "Jennifer, the metal door in the laundry room floor. What's down there?" She looked through me, her eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. "Dinner service begins at 6 p.m. in the main dining room. Tonight's special is grilled mahi-mahi." Her voice had the same rehearsed quality I'd come to associate with all staff responses. I tried several more questions about the door, the basement, even asking directly about medical equipment. Each time, Jennifer responded with unrelated resort information or simply stared as if I hadn't spoken. Eventually, I gave up and returned to my room. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Around 2 a.m., a sound started, a scraping, dragging noise that seemed to come from inside the walls. At first, I thought it might be pipes or the building settling, but it moved. Up, across, down, across again, like something following a path through the walls themselves. I sat up, startled. The sound paused, then continued, now directly behind the wall at my headboard. Standing on the bed, I checked the ceiling vent, a standard metal grate secured by 2 small screws. Using a butter knife from my emergency supplies, I loosened them and pulled the grate free. A dark passage extended beyond. Not a normal ventilation shaft, but a crawl space that seemed designed for access. Dust covered the floor of it, except for a clear path down the center where something, or someone, had been moving regularly. After replacing the vent, I began searching my room for other hidden access points. In the closet, behind my hanging shirts, I noticed the back panel didn't sit flush with the wall. Pushing against it revealed another butter knife width gap along one side. I worked the knife into the gap and pried gently until the panel popped free. Behind it was not the expected wall studs, but a small metal locker. Inside, a rack held clear glass syringes, each carefully labeled with dates and numbers. Some dates were from weeks ago, others from days earlier. One was marked with tomorrow's date and a long string of numbers that might have been coordinates or a patient code. My hands shook as I carefully closed the panel and pushed the hanging clothes back into place. Whatever was happening at Palmetto Bay Resort went far beyond strange staff and unchanging clouds. The syringes, the access tunnels, the door in the floor. This was organized and methodical. And I was apparently scheduled for something tomorrow. I packed quickly and quietly. My backpack held the remaining protein bars and water bottles. I added my passport, wallet, phone, useless as it was, a resort towel, and the butter knife. I considered taking one of the syringes as evidence, but feared what might be inside it. The resort hallways were silent as I made my way outside through a service exit. The night air felt heavy with humidity. Following the path away from the main buildings, I passed the pool where, even at 3 a.m., the same man continued his perfect circles, his movements visible in the underwater lights that never turned off. I found the overgrown tennis court behind the resort's main building. The net had rotted away years ago, and weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete. Beyond it stood a rusted chain-link fence with a sign reading, "Staff only, no guest access." The lock on the gate had long since broken, the gate itself hanging from a single hinge. Pushing through, I entered the jungle that covered most of the island. I had no flashlight, relying instead on the surprisingly bright moon to light up the faint path ahead. Insects buzzed around me, the only normal-sounding thing I'd experienced in days. The vegetation grew denser as I moved away from the resort. Vines draped from trees, and roots threatened to trip me with every step. I had no idea where I was going, just away from the resort and whatever waited for me there tomorrow. After what felt like hours, the trees thinned slightly, and I caught the scent of salt water. Following it, I came out onto a small, rocky beach. Half hidden by overgrown vegetation sat a wooden structure, a boathouse so weathered it nearly blended into the surrounding forest. Vines had grown over the doors, requiring me to cut through them with my butter knife. Inside, moonlight filtered through gaps in the wooden slats, showing a decaying speedboat on a trailer. The hull was cracked in places, the once white fiberglass now yellow with age. The engine cover hung open, showing rusted components. Scattered around the dirt floor were tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, what looked like spare parts. A very old workbench lined one wall, its surface littered with fishing equipment and boat maintenance supplies. My exhaustion vanished as I looked over the scene. This wasn't just a boat, it was away off the island, away from the resort, the staff, the syringes with tomorrow's date. I immediately set to work, examining the hull's damage in the dim light. Several cracks would need patching. The engine was missing spark plugs and had corroded wiring. The fuel tank had a strong smell of old gasoline. The work would be extensive, but I had no choice. Finding a heavy tarp in the corner of the boathouse, I pulled it over myself for minimal protection and began sorting through the tools. I had no boat repair experience, but I'd worked on car engines before. The basics couldn't be that different. Physics and mechanics would be the same. As the first hint of dawn appeared through the boathouse slats, I was already elbow-deep in the engine compartment, working with desperate focus. Every noise from the jungle made me freeze, expecting resort staff to appear at any moment. But no one came. I kept working, determined to make this boat functional again. I had no idea what waited for me back at the resort, but I knew for sure that I needed to be gone before tomorrow's date arrived with my name on that syringe. The smell of rust and salt filled my nostrils as I worked through the night. My hands, slick with grease and salt water, trembled from exhaustion and hunger. The protein bars I'd rationed were nearly gone, and I'd been awake for almost 30 hours straight. But stopping wasn't an option. I laid on my back underneath the speedboat's hull, applying marine epoxy to the largest crack with a putty knife found in the workbench drawer. The patch job wouldn't win any beauty contests, but it only needed to hold long enough to reach Nassau or any place with normal people and working phones. The boat's engine had been the biggest challenge. Corrosion had eaten through wiring harnesses, and several hoses had degraded into brittle husks that crumbled at my touch. I'd spent hours fabricating replacements from bits of rubber and plastic I found around the boathouse. The spark plugs were caked with oxidation, which I scraped away using a rusty file. The fuel in the tank had separated into a foul-smelling sludge that I siphoned out as best I could, replacing it with a mixture of fresh gas from a half-full container I found under the workbench and a splash of oil to lubricate the engine's upper cylinders. Sweat dripped into my eyes as I tightened the last bolt on the water pump housing. The eastern sky had brightened to a pale blue, marking nearly 12 hours since I'd started working. My every muscle ached. My fingernails were torn, and cuts crisscrossed my hands from sharp metal edges and stripped screws. But the engine looked like it might actually run, and the hull's patches had set firmly. "Come on," I whispered to the boat, patting its side like an old friend. "We both need to get out of here." I pried open the rusted trailer mechanism, allowing the boat to slide down toward the water. My shoulders burned as I pushed, inch by painful inch, over the rough ground. The boat was heavy and hard to move on the uneven terrain. No one had come looking for me. No search parties, no security staff, no one calling my name through the jungle. Their absence felt more sinister than any pursuit would have been. Either they didn't care that I'd left, or they knew exactly where I was and were simply watching, waiting. The boat finally touched water, barely floating. I climbed aboard, my fingers finding the ignition wires I'd prepared. Twisting them together, I heard the starter motor grind weakly. Nothing. I tried again. The motor turned over slowly but wouldn't start. "Please," I said, my voice cracking with desperation. "Please work." On the third try, the engine made a noise, blew out a cloud of blue smoke, then started up. It sounded shaky, but it was running. I tossed the boat ropes into the boat and pushed away from shore, turning toward open water. That's when I noticed them. Behind me, at the edge of the trees where the small beach met the jungle, was everyone who worked at the resort standing there. Sarah from the front desk, Jennifer, the bartender, the workers, the cleaners, even the taxi driver who'd brought me from the airstrip. They stood in a line along the shore, spaced out, all in their work clothes even though it was so early. They just stood there, no waving, no shouting. They just watched with blank faces as I moved away from the island. I felt weird as I sped up the engine, pushing it harder than I should have. It made rattling noises but kept going as I headed toward what I hoped was Nassau. The island and all those people watching got smaller behind me until I couldn't see them anymore. Out on open water, things were still strange. No birds flying around, no fish jumping, not even the usual Bahamian seagrass floating by. The water looked too flat and empty. Hours went by. The morning sun got higher, beating down on my head. I'd forgotten sunscreen and had no hat. My lips were dry from not having enough water as I finished my last bottle. The engine temperature gauge, which amazingly still worked, kept rising toward the red zone as I kept going. Then finally, I saw it. Buildings on the horizon. The Nassau skyline got closer, buildings becoming clearer. I came in slowly, watching people moving along the harbor. They walked differently from each other. They moved their hands while talking. They looked at their phones. They acted like normal people. I felt so relieved. I steered the boat toward a public dock, turning off the engine and floating the last few yards. The boat bumped against the rubber guards. With shaky hands, I tied it to a post, then sat down on the dock, my legs barely holding me up. "Hey, you can't dock here without clearance." I looked up to see a uniformed harbor official approaching. His face showed genuine annoyance that changed to concern when he got closer. "My God, man, you okay? You look like you've been through hell." I laughed weakly. It was the first normal human interaction I'd had in days. The harbor official's irritation, his concern, it all felt wonderfully authentic. "Water," I managed to say. He unclipped a bottle from his belt and handed it to me. "Where'd you come from in that wreck? That boat shouldn't even float." I took a big gulp before answering. "Norman's Cay, Palmetto Bay Resort." The official's face got serious. He looked at the boat, then back at me, suddenly more interested. "That's not possible. No boats have come from that direction in years." "I was a guest there," I insisted. "I escaped last night." He helped me to my feet and took me to a small harbor authority building. Inside, he sat me down and gave me another water bottle and a packaged sandwich from a small refrigerator. As I devoured it, he looked at me with growing concern. "Palmetto Bay Resort," he said slowly. "You're sure that's where you were?" I nodded, my mouth full of the first real food I'd eaten in days. "Mister, that resort was condemned 15 years ago, after the incidents." I froze mid-chew. "What incidents?" Marshall sat down heavily across from me. "Some kind of experimental medical program. Started as a wellness retreat, then went bad. People died, lots of people, the whole place was shut down, the island restricted. No commercial flights go there, no ferry service, nothing." "That's not possible. I flew there 4 days ago. I have my booking confirmation." I reached for my phone, but remembered it contained no usable photos. "What's today's date?" I asked suddenly. He told me. I stared at him in disbelief. "That's 15 years after I booked my trip." Marshall's face went pale. "Wait here," he said, getting up. "I need to call this in." While he stepped outside to use his radio, I pulled out my wallet with shaky hands. Among my credit cards and ID was something that hadn't been there before, a key card for room 217 at Palmetto Bay Resort. The card looked old and worn. In the corner was a date stamp from 15 years earlier. My fingers felt cold as I checked my phone date. It matched what Marshall had told me. 15 years had passed since I'd booked my vacation. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. The clouds that never moved, the staff that acted like robots, the people who never ate or slept or even blinked, the weird medical equipment, the syringes labeled with dates. Marshall came back looking serious. "Authorities are on their way. They'll want to hear about what you saw on the island." "Tell me what happened at that resort," I demanded. "The full story." He paused, then sat down again. "It started as a high-end medical tourism operation. Experimental treatments for wealthy clients. Sometime after that, they stopped bringing patients back. Family members who came looking for them got weird stories about extended treatments or transfers to other facilities. Eventually, someone important enough went missing that authorities stepped in." "What did they find?" My throat felt dry despite the water. "Not much. Place was abandoned by then. Empty rooms, medical equipment, strange modifications to the building. Records showed hundreds of guests checked in who never checked out." I thought of the woman standing still in the surf, the man walking endless circles around the pool, the emptiness in the staff's eyes. Some kind of government investigation happened, all very hush-hush. Island was officially closed, resort condemned. That was 15 years ago. Nobody goes there now. Nobody comes from there. "Except me," I whispered. "Except you." Marshall leaned forward. "So how did you get there? And more importantly, what were you doing there for 15 years?"